Hi, welcome to Computers for the Completely Clueless. I'm Lee Keller.
And I'm completely clueless, Lee. Oh, I'm actually Kim Cavanaugh, and our show is for people who may not be comfortable with their computer. Clueless may be a little bit strong, but it's okay.
But we've all been there.
We've been there, and Lee and I have made as many mistakes as you have, and then some.
Oh, much more.
And, we've learned a lot about computers just through trial and error, and a lot of error. So this show is meant to make things comfortable for you, and for us to kind of get you feeling more confident with your computer.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we have to feel comfortable with our mistakes because we make a lot of them.
That's right. Now, we're going to go ahead and look at our objectives for today's show.
Yeah.
We always like to start out with a kind of a list. We're teachers at heart, so we like to know what we're going to be talking about during the show, and we want you to know as well. This is our 4th episode, and in our previous episodes, we've talked a lot about how to organize things like files and folders and the whole concept of how computers are organized.
And we get a lot of questions specific to those.
We do. We're going to talk a little bit more again about how to view things on your computer, because fundamentally, that's one of the things that people have to be able to do. How do I find my files? How do I organize my files? Where are my folders? Why did the computer eat my stuff?
Why can't I see this?
Yeah, exactly. And in many cases, the computer didn't eat your stuff. It's just a matter of you forgot where you put it. So that's one of those tasks that you really have to kind of get comfortable with before you'll be comfortable with your computer. So we're going to be taking a look at that. Of course, we'll have viewer mail, but I thought we'd start today, Lee, by actually looking at the inside of a computer.
A little bit of a biology course.
Right.
We're going to dissect this thing.
Yeah, we've already pulled away the skin and taken off the outer case, and I'm going to reach around myself here and grab this piece of equipment, and we're going to hold that up at a little bit of an angle so we can get her on the computer. So most computers are going to have some kind of latch. It used to be you had to take a whole bunch of screws loose.
6 to 8.
And that's how you and I got the way we are, because screws got loose and things never got put back. So you might have to take 4 or 5 screws apart on an older computer, but essentially you're going to get down to this part.
They're almost all going to look the same inside.
They are, and the funny thing is that a lot of the components come from the same companies. Even though the case in this case says it's a Dell, it might say it's a Hewlett-Packard, but if you look inside, it's got a Toshiba hard drive, and they both have the same thing. So let's take a quick look around here inside. Doesn't look too scary, Lee.
No.
I don't see the hamsters.
What's this thing with the spikes?
All right, well, that's a good question. This thing with the spikes is actually a plumbing device, correct?
Sink.
It's a sink.
It's a heat sink.
It's a heat sink, and what that does is it's like a radiator. It allows the heat from the object underneath it to radiate out.
And what would be underneath there that generates so much heat?
I was going to ask you, Lee, what's underneath that heat
That's going to be the CPU. That's going to be the brains of the computer. That's processing everything.
Right. So when you say something is 2.4 gigahertz processor, what they're talking about is the silicone chip that's underneath this heatsink. Now, is this something that the average home user would want to change?
No.
No.
If you're at home, you usually don't want to mess with that unless you feel like that computer's a little bit on the disposable side.
Right. So, in other words, you're changing it from a work machine to a hobby at that point.
Oh, yeah. You're doing some serious things
at that
point.
Now, we see this big green thing here, and it's got all sorts of, it looks like transistors plugged into it.
That's our motherboard.
And there's actually a little battery, like a watch battery.
That battery is something a lot of people don't realize, but after about 4 years, that might go dead, and that's called your BIOS battery.
Right.
And that's what keeps the clock and the computer going.
Right, exactly. And so sometimes these will go bad, it just slips right out. But the green thing is called what?
Motherboard.
Motherboard, and it's the motherboard because everything docks into it.
Right.
So if you look around on the motherboard, you'll see things that are plugged into it. We already saw the processor here, and now we've got a bunch of cables back over here. The box here with all the thick wires is the power supply.
Yep, that's where it all comes from.
Right, and a lot of times that's another item that sometimes will go bad. If your computer is, and I have as well, if your computer is like powering down all by itself or seems to be losing...
Or doesn't come on at all.
Or doesn't come on at all, that's always a bad sign. Then your power supply might be the culprit there. Now this appears to be a fan.
Yep, for cooling the inside.
Right, because computers do generate a lot of heat. And then over here on the right side, we have card slots.
Usually PCI on a PC.
Okay, on a PC, that's the type of slot they are, a PCI card. And what these allow you to do is add to the capabilities of the computer.
And you have to be careful about the components that you buy because they might not fit. You see you have two different sizes in there.
Right.
If you filled one and you need that size again, it might not be
this
working.
is also, now where would I put my RAM, Lee?
Let's see, memory. Isn't this memory over here?
Yep, there's our memory over here. There's a couple slots that are a little bit hard to see.
Yeah, pop that out, but
these are our memory cards here. And getting back to these slots over here, let's say, for instance, you wanted a faster graphics processor. You could just plug it in here, and then your monitor would plug in the back instead of the normal location. And then finally, over here, there's 3 components, and we're not going to take them all the way apart.
You want to take this one out there?
Take this one out if we can get it without
there you go.
breaking anything.
My fingers.
This is the CD-ROM drive.
And you see how easy it is to take out. Remember, everything used to be a bunch of screws and harnesses and things.
Now it's all compartmentalized. And you could actually change this out. Let's say, for instance, you had an old CD-ROM, but it didn't have a writer. You could swap these out.
DVD player.
Or change it to a DVD player. Now, this computer actually has a what are these called? Floppy drive.
Floppy drive. You don't see that much anymore.
And then underneath it, and you can't really see it very well, underneath that is the hard drive.
Little black spot in the back there.
Right. That's your permanent storage. That's the thing that spins at 7,200 RPMs. It's got a magnetic disk, and all your programs, documents, and everything lives right in there.
But it's amazing, for Kim and I, we've been playing with these things for a while. There used to be a lot more work to doing these. Your memory chips used to take several steps to get into. Everything was much more complicated. Working on a computer today, as far as inserting devices, upgrading it, not quite as difficult as it used to be. It's more consumer friendly.
Right, and it's not that scary. Most consumers don't need to open up the case. The exception might be if you feel like your computer is getting hot or overheating, and I'm going to turn this down. The big culprit is, I don't know if Jeff can zoom in on this to see it closely enough.
Oh, yeah, the dirt on that?
There's dust. That's one of the big culprits, and if this dust gets built up, sometimes it'll actually be inside your computer. The way to clean that out is not with your vacuum cleaner.
No?
No, because vacuum cleaners generate static electricity.
Oh,
and that's a good way to fry your motherboard. All right, you do that, your computer's history. What you want to do is, if you want to do this at home, you get a can of compressed air. You can get those at one of the office supply stores.
Unbelievable. They actually sell cans filled with air.
Cans filled with air.
Think about that. Air in a can, and they can sell it to you.
And yet, Lee, we pay you for being full of hot air all the time. So, I mean, there's a market in air that we didn't really appreciate.
We're all on there.
So, you can take compressed air and you can just blow out the inside of your computer. And for most people, that's really about as much maintenance on the inside of the case that you want to do.
Very important thing to do, probably at least once a year, if not twice.
Maybe add that to the daylight savings time task of changing out your batteries for your, for the smoke detectors, and now, blow out the dust from your inside of your computer.
And there'll be a lot of dust. Another thing is, if you keep your computer on the floor, it'll get dirtier faster. If it's up on your desktop, it's not going to get quite as dirty, but you'll still see the accumulation.
Right, and of course, the dirt doesn't actually get into any of the files that you're working on. You don't have to worry about seeing specs in your Word documents. But what it does do is it hurts the cooling capacity of the fan and these heat sinks and radiators. Those get filled up with air, and it doesn't cool properly. So that's where you can have a problem.
Well, we might have to get off the air real quick here. We have to get this back to your director's office before he misses this.
Got it.
But, we're going to be right back in a few minutes to give you more clues on computers for the completely clueless.